Let's see. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, so the Amazon is on fire. One of the reasons why it's on fire is the way that we farm, modern agriculture. We burn the rainforest in order to make room for cattle for grazing, and also burn it to make room for growing crops to feed that cattle. So the Amazon is on fire because of our burgers and our steaks. So this is an issue, and as we grow in population to the tune of 10 billion people by 2050, what will happen if we continue to expand food production in this way? So what if we could expand food production to feed our growing population in a way that would preserve our natural habitat, and in a way that does not require arable land at all, and in fact where you can grow food, rain or shine, day or night, in any geography and any weather. So I'm here to talk to you about that solution. We call it air protein. And air protein is inspired by work that was done by NASA during the space program, where they were looking at how to feed astronauts on long journeys to distant planets that would take a year or more. You'd have to figure out many things in order to make that type of a trip successful, but one of the things that you'd have to figure out would be how to feed those astronauts. And we are a carbon-based life form, and so we get our carbon through our food. And so feeding people is the same as figuring out how to recycle carbon. So one of the ideas that they came up with involved the use of single-celled organisms, microorganisms that could use carbon dioxide as one of their core raw materials. And so these microorganisms, you'd feed them carbon dioxide, other elements of the air we breathe, nitrogen, oxygen, and along with power and other micronutrients, you could essentially grow food with these microorganisms, which the astronauts would then eat, and they'd get their carbon through that food, and then that carbon would come out in the form of carbon dioxide, which would then be captured by the microbes, which would then grow more food, which the astronauts would eat, carbon dioxide, and so closed loop carbon cycles could be created. So this was an interesting idea, but didn't go anywhere. It sat on the shelf. It was first sort of investigated in the 60s and 70s. So we here on Earth, you can think of the Earth like a spaceship. We actually do have limited resources, and as our population continues to grow, that becomes more and more apparent. And we have a lot of carbon that we have to deal with. And so we're on a mission to finish NASA's work, as it were, and create the most sustainable way of making protein. So if we want to talk about getting to this new innovation, maybe we can step back for a second and talk about farming in general. At some point, people were hunters and gatherers, and then as people began to settle in villages, cities, etc., farming was invented, and then many inventions have come along the way because we've had to figure out how to grow more food more efficiently for more people. And one of the key inventions actually happened when it was discovered how to capture nitrogen from the air and essentially put it into a material that you can put into the soil, into fertilizer. And that increased crop yield dramatically. So that's just an example of innovation success that has led to us being able to grow enough food to feed billions of people today. But we have to grow more food if we're going to feed 10 billion people by 2050. And there's been a number of unintended consequences. One of them, of course, being the fact that natural habitats are being removed. The Amazon is the largest rainforest, and there are rainforests throughout the world that are being removed. And that's, many species, animals, plants, insects, life, vegetation, that's being destroyed. And in many cases, species are going extinct. So that's been an unintended consequence of this farming innovation process that we have. And beyond rainforests, just too much land in general is being used. So an area the size of South Africa and South America and Africa combined has already been cleared for modern agriculture. That's over 19 million square miles for grazing, for crops, etc. So if we have to feed 10 billion people, where are we going to get all this land? How do we keep clearing land to get there? And another unintended consequence has been the greenhouse gas issue. Modern agriculture produces more greenhouse gases than our planes, our trains, our trucks, and our cars all combined. So that's been a challenge. Beyond that, we look at the degradation that has happened with our soil. In fact, a recent Scientific American article says that we have 60 years left of soil if the degradation continues at the same rate. So we have to do something about that. We need innovation. We need to take it to the next level. So that's where this concept of using elements of the air comes in, going from land-based production to air-based production. And it may sound like science fiction, it may sound out there, different, but it's actually very similar to our standard process for growing foods. We have energy, an energy source, the sun. We have elements like carbon dioxide, which plants use, and they fix the carbon dioxide, and nitrogen and water. And then we add that to soil, to arable land where the crops grow. And they take months, we'll cultivate them, do different things to them to get them to grow. And then we have our carbohydrates, our proteins, our oils, things that make up the nutrition. We only change a couple things here. So we still need a source of energy. So you can still use solar power, as it were, but you can also use wind energy, other sources of energy that are renewable. And then elements of the air, carbon dioxide. We use water, nitrogen, oxygen, some other things. And then you do something that's more similar to fermentation. So you have a process where it's like brewing beer, but instead you're brewing protein and other elements as well. And it happens in a matter of days instead of months in the case of crops. So in this way, you can get oils and proteins and carbohydrates and all the nutrients that you need for a healthy diet. And we're starting with protein as kind of a key focus. We call it air protein, what we're making. And the protein has the benefit of having all the essential amino acids in a profile similar to animal nutrition. That's one of the first protein sources that we're commercializing. And so you can make many of the meat-free items out there that we're becoming more and more excited about. Meat-free burgers, meat-free chicken, meat-free fish. Nutrition is really a core focus of what we're doing. A complete protein, all the essential amino acids, high protein content, rich in vitamins and minerals, including vitamin B12, which is actually lacking in a vegan diet. Many vegetarians or vegans do have to take supplements on occasion. And then free from many of the things that others, that people are looking to be absent from their food. So it fits for many different dietary needs. So the benefit of going from land-based production to air-based production is just that you use so much less land. And the equivalent would be if you have a soy protein farm, it would have to be a soy protein farm the size of Texas would generate the same amount of protein that you'd get from an air protein farm the size of Walt Disney World. So then 10,000 times less land required for this type of production process. And if you think about the details, it becomes apparent why this is the case. One is that you don't need to scale horizontally. You don't need a land area for this type of production. You can scale vertically. So this is vertical production. You don't need to go to only certain places where there's certain types of weather conditions. This process runs day or night, rain or shine, in any weather throughout the year. And the process is very quick, just like brewing beer or making yogurt. It's a very quick process, happens in hours and days versus months, or in the case of animal agriculture, years. So going from land-based production to air-based production can have a huge impact on sustainably feeding the future. And if we think about our planet as a spaceship, our crew is growing to the tune of 10 billion people by 2050. So we have to figure out ways to be more sustainable in our food production processes. If we scaled up animal agriculture in the way that it's done now, what would that look like? There are solutions, and we believe this is a key solution to produce food in a way that reduces greenhouse gases and leaves our habitats untouched. We believe this is critical for the future so that we can have a sustainable tomorrow for our progeny. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyson. And now we're going over to Morgan Keim to learn a little bit about Motif FoodWorks, which you guys just rebranded to, if I'm not.
We did.
Okay.
Yep.
And so tell us a little bit. Motif FoodWorks is relatively new, grew out of Ginkgo Bioworks a year ago. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Sure. So Motif FoodWorks is an ingredients innovation company that's really focused on creating better animal-free food experiences for everyone. We're a team of food scientists and really food lovers who are looking from a sensory and food science perspective about all the things that make food so delicious, so functional, so nutritious for us, and trying to figure out how do we dissect and unravel the secrets of food to create better animal-free ingredients using a fermentation process to replicate animal foods. So our process really works by taking a deep analysis of all of the different things within what makes eating a burger, drinking a milkshake, for instance, what makes that so delicious? What kind of nutrients come out of that for us? What sorts of textures and functionalities come from animal-based foods, and identifying essentially where the status quo is for plant-based versions of that. So, for instance, do plant-based cheeses function the same way as what animal-based cheeses might do? We map out the deltas between essentially what needs improvement and really see, how do we kind of find characterizing specialty ingredients that we can create for big and small food companies to be able to make better animal-free versions of those foods. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, Catherine, we spun out of Ginkgo Bioworks actually last March, and really we're leveraging their platform of DNA understanding for both plant and animal DNA to match those key areas of what we're trying to replicate to make better animal-free experiences, animal-free foods. But they have this whole database, one of the biggest databases in the world of DNA, where we can essentially look through the whole realm of proteins and find different components, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, that can best match for the problems that we're trying to solve for in plant-based. Then Ginkgo will actually write the protein, the different things that we're creating onto a piece of animal-free DNA, which they'll put into a microbe, and essentially through a fermentation process, not unlike brewing beer, we can create larger scale versions of that known ingredient, that animal protein or animal carbohydrate, but without the animal being involved. And so from that approach,
that's cool.
We're really looking to be able to create the next generation of what animal foods, non-animal foods will be, and appease the consumers that are looking for this kind of thing, who really don't want any trade-offs between the taste, the texture, the health profile of animal-based foods, but maybe their values are speaking to them around wanting maybe healthier options, more sustainable options, or simply looking towards animal welfare and trying to lessen their impact there.
Okay, so for people like me who maybe barely got through 11th grade bio and have relatively limited knowledge about what exactly you're doing science-wise, is this like genetic modification? Is it CRISPR? Is it something totally new? Maybe give us a little bit more context about that.
Sure. So in that process, what we're doing is essentially creating organisms that we can insert these proteins into, these carbohydrates into. That is a genetic engineering process that Ginkgo Bioworks delivers for us. So they make these custom microbes that essentially allow us to produce, through scale and efficiency, higher amounts of these valuable ingredients that we can give to food companies. However, the proteins themselves are non-GMO. These are known natural proteins They go into the microbe. The microbe is fed. It, basically creates a whole bunch of the proteins, and then we extract the microbe and the protein out of the microbe so that the protein never changes. It's that same known natural protein, and it's actually a non-GM protein.
Interesting.
But the processing is the GM part.
Okay, that's high tech.
It's a little cutting edge.
Yeah, which is cool. So I'm trying to get a better sense of like what exactly I might be eating if I'm eating a Motif product. Though I wouldn't be eating a Motif product, right? You guys are partnering with food corporations, you said, and they're like, I want a cheese made without animals, can't figure out how to do it, cashews aren't cutting it. You're like, no problem, we'll figure this out for you. And so would you then help them create this cheese and they would just market it, or how does that partnership work?
Yeah, exactly. So we're focused right now on 3 verticals, and we're really looking. We should actually have samples of these 3 ingredients by early next year to sell the following year. So early 2021 is when we're looking to bring these to market. But our first 3 verticals we're really focused on right now. One is in meat alternatives. So what kind of characterizing ingredients could make better taste, and better texture of meat alternatives, or maybe the color denaturation. When you put a plant-based burger on the grill, it shouldn't all just be red or dyed a certain color. What could we put in there that could actually allow it to change the color the way an animal-based meat would? That's our first area. Our second area is actually in dairy bioactives. This is a really interesting area because a lot of the components that are targeted within the current dairy industry require a massive amount of processing. They're very expensive. Sometimes there are supply chain issues. Sometimes there are food safety issues. It's sort of a logical thing that if we wanted this one piece of, let's say, a component that makes up a whey protein, and whey protein is made up of lots of different things. If we wanted this one piece because it delivers great immunity functionality, for instance, and we could use that in applications, why wouldn't we just create that one thing? Why would we want to go through the whole process of removing all the dairy and overly processing these things? So that's another area where we're really looking to innovate. And then lastly is actually improving the status quo of current plant proteins. So a lot of plant proteins, take pea, for example, pea protein. The protein digestibility and amino acid score is not at the caliber of animal-based proteins. And so what if we could find novel proteins to add to that to then allow it to have a as good or better nutritional profile to animal proteins as animal would? Then we'd be able to talk to consumers and say, look, this plant-based version of something, a plant-based milk, let's say, has the same nutritional profile as the animal-based milk. Why would you want the animal one?
And so I'm curious about why now? I mean, as you said, you spun out at Ginkgo Bioworks. That's been around for a while. What is it about this time that you were like, okay, this merits its own separate company? I think we're ready to sort of scale up to the big leagues here.
Yeah, so, I mean, luckily from the landscape of what's going on in plant-based foods right now, there's been a lot of interest, a lot of investment on behalf of investors, on behalf of retailers, on behalf of CPG brands, all across the chain. But this is being driven by consumers, right? It's consumer-centric. Consumers are demanding that they want less animal protein, and they want better alternatives to that from either their aspirational values of sustainability or animal welfare, or from just a health perspective. Some are just being told simply, don't eat as much meat. It's not healthy for you. There's a fourth driver in there that's actually, it's just kind of trendy, and you're sort of getting some people from that angle. So you have this interesting space where we've had incredible innovation from lots of different companies, and really there's no shortage of companies that are making meat, dairy, egg alternatives. But the ones that can actually mimic the animal-based versions one-to-one are few and far between. And so really that's the gap that we're filling. That's what Motif was set here to do. You see in the data, 98% of consumers who eat meat alternatives also eat who eat plant-based alternatives also eat meat. So it's really like a meat consumer, not like a vegan vegetarian.
I think they're called flexitarians.
Exactly.
That's the cool new term.
The flexitarian consumer. And so you're seeing these people saying, hey, we want more options, but at the same time, there are all these headwinds around maybe these foods aren't so healthy, or maybe they're, a plant-based meat burger is overly processed. What characterizing ingredients could do, fermented ingredients, could eliminate some of the junky sugars or salts or oils that we have to put into the products to actually create better nutrition while also enhancing the functionality, the taste, and that kind of thing.
Okay, fantastic. I think that's a good intro to Motif. And now let's bring up Peru, talk a little bit about Perfect Day. You can just chill right here.
Cool.
All right, so you are a co-founder of Perfect Day. Tell people what that is, if you don't know.
So the cool version of what Perfect Day is we make real cow's milk without the animal. So we're magicians at heart, and we're just recreating dairy using fermentation. The boring version is we are a B2B ingredient company. We're creating a new supply chain for animal-free dairy ingredients. The protein fractions, the fats, the sugars, whatever you want that comes from milk today, we are making a supply chain using fermentation to produce the exact same ingredients. So if you're a brand, we will be working with brands to launch the same products they already sell today, but made in a kinder, greener, better way.
Well, that's the end goal, but you have already, in fact, launched an initial product, which I was fortunate enough to taste. So maybe give people a little preview of that.
So about 3 months ago, we did a limited edition launch of an ice cream made using whey protein produced using fermentation rather than animal farming. And the reviews were absolutely spectacular.
There we go. Right here.
You can confirm that.
Yeah.
We were also in LA with an ice cream truck just showing people what our technology is capable of. And the reason isn't because we're a D2C company, we're not going to launch products. We actually will be working with brands and leveraging their scale and distribution to get out there in a big way to have impact. But we wanted to start having that conversation with the end consumer on what this is, what this technology can enable, and how to talk about it. Because the biggest question we get is, okay, you're using fermentation, I get that, but you're making milk and milk ingredients without the cow. That makes no sense to me. And that's true, and that's the conversation we're starting to have. We need to come up with new vocabulary for this field in general, because this isn't plant-based, it's also not animal-based. It's sort of its own third category. We call it flora-based protein, flora from microflora. You can use bacteria, you can use yeast, you can use fungi, you can use algae. At the end of the day, if you're using fermentation, you need a microbe that eats carbon or sugar and converts it into whatever you want. This is the third way of making protein. It's really actually not new. It might sound new to a lot of people, but as a society, we've been using this technology for 40 years now. It really isn't new. We're just applying it in a new way. That is the reality of it. And in order to start that conversation with people, we just launched that ice cream. We created a good amount of buzz. We just wanted to show that we are real. It's finally time. This is, we're no longer just a startup. We have successfully scaled the technology. Now let's actually start launching products and having real impact in the planet.
Yeah, this is interesting because you guys are both clearly developing on that timeline, but you are the only one that has so far launched a product that consumers are just tasting and writing about and anyone could have bought from your limited edition launch. So has that been, I guess I'm curious, like, as you say, this is a new field, people aren't totally familiar with it, and we'll all talk about this, but how did you effectively communicate that to people when they were buying your ice cream? Did you put flora-based on there? Did you put fermented? Did you not say anything and just hope that they don't notice the difference? Because I didn't notice the difference. That's the worst. Okay, so not that one.
That transparency is key, is what we found. And so on the ice cream that we sold, if you look at the packaging, we did give a call out to flora-based. We wanted people to ask, what does that term mean? And if you look at the body where we were explaining what we're doing, we were very transparent in saying no animal involved, but it does contain real milk protein. Because our protein is identical and milk protein is an allergen. We had to let people know that if you're allergic to milk protein, do not buy this product or you will have a reaction. But if you're avoiding milk protein for whatever reason, because it comes from an animal, because of the lactose, whatever else, don't worry, this actually is vegan, it's animal free, you can buy it. And we're starting to build a little bit of value behind the term flora-based. We want everybody else to accept it and just run with it. And we're hopeful that we can do that in the next couple of years, because if you look at the term plant-based, we did a Google ad trend search. In 2012, nobody was using it. 2013, it slowly started to rise, and then it just grew exponentially, and today, plant-based is a thing. People know what it means, and they are behind it. We're hoping to do the same thing for fermentation-derived protein. Fermentation-based, you can use it, but it's just really long. We wanted something that's a little bit shorter, that came from science, but also had a marketing-y buzz to it, hence flour-based.
Right, because plant-based, people are all about plant-based, but really hesitant towards vegan, you know?
Yep.
They're like, I don't know, I'm not a vegan, so I can't eat vegan. But I can eat plant-based. So maybe they're like, fermentation, like, what does that mean? But flour-based, okay.
Hopefully we can make it sound.
Yeah, you heard it here first. We're gonna start the trend. And since you are the first people to have a product out in the market, I can pick on you a little bit and say,
Absolutely.
and you're very transparent about this, it's relatively expensive. Right now you are selling the pints of ice cream for $20 a pint, which is pricier than Ben & Jerry's.
Yep.
How are you working to cut down on the cost?
So we partnered with ADM to scale up to true commercial scale and reduce our cost. And actually, next year when we come out with some products in a big way, the pricing will already be competitive. And over the next few years, as we go up and scale with them, we know that we've done the math. At the end of the day, once we're truly commercial, this technology will allow us to produce protein that's 40% more affordable than what's currently available. You need to be affordable in order to have impact. Otherwise, this is a waste of our time at the end of the day. So we do believe we can go down that cost curve. You can't start there from day one. I wish we could. But yes, that was the biggest complaint we received from customers is on the price. But we had a bunch of fans fighting on our behalf saying, hey, the first Tesla didn't cost $30,000. It costed $200,000. And just give them some time. We're working on it.
Yeah, you guys are young. What, you've been around since 2014?
2014, yeah, 5.5 years
There
now.
you go. It's starting. And you're saying down the road with future partners, are you envisioning when that happens that it'll be like cheese made with Perfect Day or flour-based milk? Like, how are you gonna have a presence there?
In the long term, we don't even want any value coming to us.
Okay.
But in the beginning, transparency is key. And we're far better at communicating what we do and why we do it than others out there, because it is our story. That's why we founded the company. It's not about saving a buck. It is about making a better world. So in the beginning, you will see it being called Perfect Day Powered. It's similar to the Intel Inside model. So on any package, we will demand that Perfect Day is front and center. In the future, it'll just be non-animal whey protein, non-animal casein, just non-animal or flour-based. And people should understand that. There are others working on this. And anybody can hopefully use the same terminology. We don't want something that's only owned by Perfect Day. We want to democratize it, and everybody should be able to use it.
All right, speaking of everybody, let's get Lisa back up here and let's dive in and start thinking of your questions, because in about 15-ish minutes, I'm gonna call on you guys. So get some hardballs ready. They're smart enough to handle it. Okay, well, I have so many questions because I think this area is fascinating as someone who is obsessed with alternative protein. And the vast majority of what I cover for The Spoon, I work for The Spoon if I didn't say that, are plant-based, mostly plant-based, a little bit about cell-based, cultured meat, seafood, etc. So I'm curious, this is, as Peru, as you were saying, it's kind of a third space. And why did you guys choose, you all sort of have similar motivations, or you're serving consumers with similar motivations, environmental, ethical, etc. Why are you like, I'm not gonna use plants, I'm not gonna grow animal tissue, I'm gonna leverage this new, totally new thing? How did that come about? Let's start over here with Lisa and then work this way.
Yeah, so when we started the company Kiverdi, which is the parent company of Air Protein, it was all about coming up with technical solutions to climate change. So governments have their roles, policy, regulatory bodies, NGOs have their role, and our question was how to get companies involved. And our answer was to make it profitable to recycle carbon. And so Kiverdi as a company has created all these different carbon recycling types of technologies. And then food is just an area where it's so critical. If you look at climate change, if you look at greenhouse gas emissions, this is an area where there's a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions. So we really need solutions, we need alternatives. And so it was definitely as a solution to climate change. And a benefit is the fact that you just don't need as much land as well.
Our focus on fermentation spans solutions that include animal and plant. So we're looking across the realm of what we know and simply saying, if we're trying to solve for a problem like, maybe binding that an egg protein could do, what binds? What plant proteins bind? What animal proteins bind? What else can we do here and produce at a scale that, one, is affordable, that we can produce, 2, brings a lot of value to the industry, and 3, solves a big problem that is in that consumer delta that we're trying to tighten. But the power of what microbial fermentation has to offer is immense, and I think we're just at the start of learning about just what we didn't know we could do. As you guys I think are doing too, like we're looking at known proteins, right? Bovine proteins or animal-based proteins, but the reality is we can take this a lot further and say, what about novel proteins? What about things that have never existed before?
Like what?
What if we could make something that has amazing antimicrobial benefits with a perfect protein profile? We can literally limit it to your imagination in the long term when you start to combine protein structuring and different things like that. So it's almost like a limitless idea that you just have to think, what could people really want? What brings the most value into the world, and can we find a way to produce that at scale and bring efficiency to it?
Yeah, fascinating. And then, why not plant-based if you're on this mission?
Honestly, the options weren't good enough. For me and Ryan, he's my co-founder, we started the company in 2014. We had a pretty parallel journey. We used to eat everything growing up. We gave up meat to become vegetarian about the start of college to reduce our impact on the planet, as well as the animal welfare concerns of industrialized farming. That first transition wasn't too bad. We just ate more cheese and pizza and more eggs and you're good. Towards the end of college, we realized dairy is part of that same system, so we tried going vegan. And we just hated our lives. That's the honest truth. Perfect Day, we got the idea, we started it because we wanted to go back to eating good food and not always being the one vegan in the table and having to eat essentially starch and no real protein in there. So it's really a personal motivation that started it. We didn't start out thinking, we're gonna start a company or be entrepreneurs. We just wanted to work for the company that was doing this. But back in 2014, nobody was. Turns out we were the first ones to have this sort of idea. We looked into milk. We are scientists by background, so we looked into it, right? We're asking, what's so magical about milk? Why can't you use plants to make better products? All these vegan products that were available, they just weren't good enough. What's missing in them? And if you really look into it, it is the protein. Milk protein is super functional. That's what gives it its nutrition. That's what allows you to make that stretchy cheese or the gel of a yogurt. It's all the protein mixing with the fats in the right way. So if you can make the protein without the animal, you can make milk without the animal. If you could make milk, you can make all your favorite products, and we could go back to eating like our friends and family. So it was mostly just
eating that good ice cream.
I've eaten a lot of ice cream over the last couple of months. It's awesome.
It's really good. So when you explain it, it sounds so easy, all of you guys. I'm like, yeah, of course. Why aren't we doing that? But I'm wondering, as you sell to more and more consumers, are you worried about educating them? Do you think people, like when I've tried to explain to friends, like what the type of, what you guys are making, they're like, oh yeah, from plants. I'm like, no, not exactly. And they're like, oh, they're growing it in a lab. Kind of. Like, how exactly do you tackle informing the consumer? As you said, transparency is key, but you also don't want to scare them off by being like, it's this really high-tech process, and people are like, I'm afraid of that. How are you guys approaching that? And maybe start over here this time. Yeah.
Well, it's part transparency and it's part leading with why, at the end of this day, the product is going to be better for them. That's what we realized. You have to lead with the why. You cannot say this is going to save $1 for a Pepsi or someone down the value chain. People are selfish at the end of the day. I am selfish at the end of the day. And if you lead with the messaging of why this product is better for you, selfish human being, and you're transparent in saying that, yes, we do use bioengineering. There is technology involved in the process. Don't try to hide anything. They're fine with it. At the end of the day, it's about taste and cost. Once you have those two locked down, combine a little bit of transparency along with the motivation and the benefits, and people are fine with it.
You think they just are like, this is cheap, it tastes great, amazing?
At least for the baby boomers and millennial generation, I actually have a lot of hope because all the testing we've done with Gen Z, completely different. They don't care. They love that you're using technology. They're growing up with phones and coding and algorithms. They don't mind technology anymore. For them, it's actually cool, and you can talk a lot more on the technology and the benefit it brings. For everybody else, this is a better product for you. It saves the world. Here, eat it.
End of discussion. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but
Yeah,
Morgan.
same. I mean, it's a better value proposition. You're appeasing consumers' aspirational values beyond taste and cost. And that's where it starts to get really interesting when you stack up against something that's made of an animal. People aren't eating an animal food because they want to kill the animal. They're eating it in spite of that. That's actually a detractor of value. So is technology going to be more of a barrier than killing an animal would be to making that decision? From our early consumer studies, we're finding that people are very open to this kind of technology.
Have you found the same, Lisa?
Yeah, when we talk to consumers, like they're just interested in the product. Like, when can I buy this? Like, when is it going to be available? I think that what we're seeing in the marketplace for those that have already launched, like Impossible Foods, et cetera, is that flavor is really the main driver. If it tastes good and it does have a mission, there's some motivation behind it. It's to help consumers reduce their environmental footprint and those things, and they're interested in that. They're looking for that. They're demanding it. That's why we're all here.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying people are demanding it. They're wondering when they can buy it. I know you mentioned 2021 is a time when you'll have samples. When can people expect to try some air protein?
Oh, I don't know if, yeah, we don't have a date that we've announced, but yeah, so next year we're working with partners now, and we'll make some announcements in the future as to when it'll be available. But we're scaling up, and these things do take time. I wish they could happen overnight, but they don't.
But this seems like it's a more immediate, and I knew you had the one product out already. People are talking about cell-based meat, and they're like, maybe to market by the end of the year, but we're kind of figuring it out. Like, this seems like has more potential for immediacy, like quick adoption.
Absolutely.
Personally, you guys agree?
100%. Again, that's because we're using 40-year-old technology. I know we're applying it in a new way, and it is new and different, but using microbes to produce amino acids, enzymes, flavors, that industry has been doing this literally since 1976. We are not inventing anything new, we're just applying it in a new way. That's why we can come out to market really, really fast and start having impact. The cell folks, you need to invent a new type of manufacturing. That takes time, that takes effort.
And you were mentioning Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat. I mean, they're the ones sort of generating a lot of buzz, all brand names, and yet all of you guys at least have a big part of your business as B2B sales. So I'm wondering why you chose to go that route. Maybe I start with you.
I think we can accomplish our core values at Motif of enabling sustainable, accessible, and nutritious animal-based foods by working with many different partners. So Impossible is pivotal in this movement because they really are one of the first brands to bring genetically produced products to market. Their heme is essentially what has been produced in their burger. Yet they're not sharing that with anybody else. This is just their patent, and that's how it's going to be, I think. So what if we could enable the landscape of the future food innovators to all have access to massively influential ingredients that help characterize their products and drive adoption globally for animal-free foods? We see it as the ultimate driver of our impact, and that's really going to be what allows Motif to succeed and grow.
Similar for you guys?
Pretty much, it's about the impact at the end of the day. That's what got us to start the company. And if you were essentially reinventing the cow today, if you're the only person using that technology, you will never have the same amount of impact you can have. If you share it with everyone out there, you can actually maybe change the world in a real fashion. If we're the only successful brand out there, sure, we can be worth 10 billion like Beyond, but that doesn't cut it for us. This needs to be shared everywhere. Most of the protein demand is actually not in America. Americans have enough protein, honest to God. We don't
but we need more.
Not really. We really don't.
We think we do. Yeah.
True.
Those ketos. Yeah, those keto people.
The real impact is in Asia. That's where most of the population is growing. Africa, Asia, that's where you need these technologies. And we're not going to be able to succeed there anytime soon unless unless we share. Find someone there, give them the technology, let them run with it, and in 10 years you can have the impact that one person can have in 100.
And by the way, on the habit creation side, the same thing is true. A lot of Americans are pretty set in their ways. We get our hamburgers when we want our hamburgers, and we've never had any problem doing that. But a lot of these, particularly like lower income countries that are coming up, are just now getting their first taste for protein. And that's what happens when they generally see a little bit of wealth. What if we can intersect them before they've established their dominant habit of eating animal proteins, drinking animal proteins, and provide them a different option that is much better for the planet, much better for animals, much better for them? How could that not work?
Mm-hmm. And Lisa, you guys have a few different products, right? Are you also developing your own branded product for Air Protein?
We are.
Okay.
So Kiverdi has a B2B strategy in general for all of its different businesses that it's in. And we spun out, or we're in the process of spinning out Air Protein really to also create some branded end products. So we believe there's opportunities to get faster to market if we do really focus on those delicious flavors that we can make. We're not making sort of equivalent proteins as these gentlemen are. This is a different type of protein. So we're making products really ready-made for the specific proteins that we're able to make. And so we believe there's an opportunity there that we're going to leverage. And then for B2B, that allows us to go beyond just kind of our first initial markets. That allows us to get into our protein-enriched pastas and our sports nutrition bars and those types of things. So that's where the B2B really will come in for us, but we'll target some specific products first.
Got it. So we might be seeing a Kiverdi or an Air Protein product in the grocery store first.
Yes.
Can you give us any hints, like chicken
Not yet.
nuggets, some protein powder?
Announcements to come.
Intriguing.
Yes.
All right, opening it up to audience questions. Anybody got something exciting, something pressing? Yes, Alex.
Hi. So I know we're talking a lot about consumer education and you all are B2B, so it's not necessarily your challenge, but I know you talked about flora-based. Are there any existing label claims and certifications that you all are trying to ensure your product fits into, or are you really envisioning creating new label claims, new certifications, like in 5 years will there be a climate-friendly certification on your package, or what does that look like for consumers?
Well, at least from the Perfect Day standpoint, we do believe it is our challenge. Even though we are B2B, we cannot leave that be for someone else. They won't do it. That's what happened with Monsanto way back then. And we're going to accept that it is our challenge at the end of the day, and we are going to educate people and consumers. When it comes to the label, climate friendly, et cetera, those are terms that can be applied to anything broadly. You can use regenerative farming to make animal protein in a very sustainable way, and that tag should apply for that, as well as plant-based, as well as us. That's why we created the term flora-based. We need specific terminology just for this field of fermentation, and all the other terms that people can create should be abstract enough that you can apply it for anything. There is a way to do animal farming right too. I have to accept that.
You guys?
I could see there being a time in the near future where certified animal-free becomes something of prominence, because the reality is these are replicated one-to-one, and the products that we'll see will taste just like animal. I mean, it'll be animal proteins, but on a piece of DNA that's not animal. And so that might be something that drives consumers and could be something to rally around.
Yes.
So I know you guys are mentioning about the fermentation process, and a lot of it is actually happening in the manufacturing facility, I believe. But if you look at like current trend, all this manufacturing facility, those heavy equipment is downsizing it, and actually at home, people are actually doing those. For example, like algae, they actually came up with the beer brewing kind of system. So do you actually envision it maybe like the fermentation process, maybe like at home, where people are actually
Absolutely.
For those who didn't hear it, he is asking if these people are wondering if people will actually ferment their own protein at home.
And that is the dream. If you look at technology on the computer side, that's what has happened. You went from gigantic rooms filled with processors to your phone is literally more powerful than that today. And that's where I personally believe food is going to, where it's so efficient that any person can grow their own food in their backyard, And given all the different technologies out there, you could grow air protein, perfect day protein, Motif, take your pick. That is the cool future that I would like to live in. And that also gives power back to the consumer in a very concrete way. Versus today, we do have to deal with big companies and work with them in order to scale and make this affordable. The future wouldn't it be awesome if we could just go directly to someone's backyard?
Well, definitely, Lisa, in space. Those astronauts are going to have to be growing their own protein, probably.
Well, that was the original motivation.
Yeah.
Yes, it was to be able to grow food in really compact environments using limited resources. So essentially, that's the model.
Fascinating. I want that.
I think there will also be co-location with food manufacturing companies. So as you're supplying, the Nestle's and Kellogg's and Unilevers of the world, you can actually decrease the carbon footprint of bringing ingredients to those places if you were just to set up a fermentation facility right on their campus where they'd use the food. So there are opportunities to even tighten that supply loop on a more industrial side as well.
We have time for one more. Yes, gray sweater.
Kind of just on that same line, as we're getting to that point to scale up, what are the barriers right now, both for you and your partners? And I'm not a scientist, but I hear fermentation across all things. Are there elements that can be shared across you guys and others in the industry?
Well, for us, at the end of the day, it's about CapEx. When you need to produce just the whey protein market, just North America alone, you're talking 220,000 metric tons. Just today, there's a demand gap for an additional 60,000 metric tons. We're on track next year to make 200 metric tons. That's nothing. It is a drop in the literal bucket. That's why we partnered with ADM. But for us to get into thousands and tens of thousands, you need a lot of money to build these assets. You're going to need a spray dryer, which will cost you $20 million in the US, and other such equipment. It tends to add up really fast. That is the biggest barrier from a making more perspective. The challenge we were focused on in the last 5 years is making it work in that big scale. So we finally have a fermentation process that scales. You can use it in the real world, agnostic of location, and it works. That took us 5 years. The next 5 years is putting up actual fermentation tanks and production and making it in large quantities.
I think there's also a reliance on ensuring solid regulatory pathways, and even though these are known ingredients, making sure that the right people within the FDA and the USDA are educated on why this delivers value to consumers, but that could pose a threat. And then, look at what we're all doing. We're taking on an entrenched, big, multi-billion-dollar industries with huge lobbying groups that don't want us anywhere near them, and we're going to threaten their livelihood.
Actually, we found a slightly different tune from the industry. There are some that, of course, do not like what we're doing, but there are many in the dairy industry that want to partner up. They're seeing the whole plant-based trend. They are changing the vocabulary such that they think of themselves as a protein company more than a dairy company. And this was shocking for us. We were in a literal boardroom filled with pictures of grandpa and grandma with cows and literally milking them. And we're like, what about that picture you have as you say you're a protein company? They're like, yeah, don't worry about that. We are firmly a protein company, so there is hope. There are some that are willing to work with you if you're open enough to work with them.
I think as an industry, having those partnerships and being able to co-create the future with them is really critical to our adoption. Really for nascent science, we're a really nasty story away from having a lot of problems. And so bonding together as an industry and being able to, educate, be transparent, and show how those interests could fit in is a really critical milestone that will help with the success of the industry.
And there are folks working on sharing those resources. So we do envision a future world where you have a brewery there. You can buy milk protein from us, you can buy egg protein from Clara, you can buy gelatin from Geltor. We do want to partner up with fellows in this industry and make it grow. Rising tide helps all. So the more we can share, the better.
And the thing that I'll add to that is that the reason why this is possible, this is even happening, is because consumers are asking for it. And so the thing that will be required is for consumers to continue to want it, continue to demand it, to be there to show up for those launches, to show up and actually purchase these products. So that's something that I think is critical. That causes the companies to act and to change.
Yeah, that's speaking to all of you guys out there. You got to show up. All right, it's almost lunchtime, but I'm going to do a quick little rapid fire question for you guys that someone told me to ask backstage and I thought was a good idea. So one takeaway from the audience after this panel, what do you want them to leave knowing about you, your company, and the future of new protein building blocks? Let's start over here with Lisa.
So for Air Protein, it's, as we scale up to feed 10 billion people by 2050, we really do have to look at our production processes, and going from land-based to air-based is a way to do that sustainably. So we believe that this is one of the most sustainable ways of producing protein. So we'd love for people to join us in that effort. We actually will be hiring very soon as we're spinning out this company. So just continue to support these types of sustainable production processes.
For us, I'd say it's only limited by your imagination. Find ways to influence people around you and teach them about the different technologies that are happening in our food, and show them that it's not super scary, that this actually represents major solutions for nutrition, for taste, texture, sustainability, welfare, and food safety.
I'd say from a takeaway standpoint, there's no one silver bullet. I know at Perfect Day we say it's awesome, and it truly is. We will have a lot of impact, but if we're the only ones that succeed, we have failed as humanity. You need solutions in food, you need it in transportation, you need it everywhere, really. So from a consumer standpoint, look at your lives and your friends' lives from that angle. It's not just food. It's maybe one day you are a flexitarian, you don't eat meat. One day you take a bike instead of taking your car to work, and together, hopefully that'll have the real impact out there. We'll see where we end up, but I have hope.
Me too. All right, fantastic. Thanks, guys. Thank you, panel. Let's give them a quick hand.